Hello, Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of the Commentariat. This is the second one, and today is the 15th of February, Wednesday, and so we're just going to take a few minutes and walk through some of the comments that appear. I'm going to take the comments starting today and work backwards. We'll do this for about 20 minutes and see what we come up with. So welcome, and I welcome your comments on the comments on the comments. So you can comment directly on the Commentariat 2 video. And I'll take a look at those and see if you like this format or not. Okay, so let's take a look at the first comment, which is from Pete Singleton. Unreliable rumor says there is a tilt in the ionosphere. Actually, Pete, I want you to take a look at this. This is the Earth. Okay, this is an arc of the Earth with the ionosphere kind of drawn to scale. Okay, so the ionosphere cannot tilt up like that because there's nothing up there. That's deep, almost deep space. Okay, we've got the solar wind, but that's outside the area protected by the atmosphere. Now, there are magnetic fields from the Earth that run out there that protect us from a lot of the junk. The solar wind will tend to follow the field lines of the magnetic field. But the actual ionosphere runs up to around 350 miles. And when you compare that with the size of the Earth, it's almost like a glove fitting on the top. We tend to draw it way up here, but to scale, this would be about that much right there. Okay? And in practice, the ionosphere is always it's constantly moving. Think of it as constantly moving electrons and ions that can act to bend the waves back to the Earth. It's always moving, okay? And so you will get a little fading. You can avoid the fading by having antennas many wavelengths apart and bringing them to a diversity receiver where you can go between one or the other. And that's because the fading here is different from the fading here. Okay, they're often uncorrelated. Okay, so yes, there's largely some tilts in there. Let's look at this from Edward Cunningham. He enjoyed this. He said he had it explained to him as like when you drive through a fog of different densities, the lighter densities allow your headlights to pass through and not blind you. The heavier densities reflect the headlights back at you. If you have really thick fog, like the D layer in the daytime, you may not be able to see at all, which is the way the D layer works in the daytime. It absorbs signals from like the 160 and 80 meter bands and can do some on the 40 meter bands, but above that is not so much of a problem. Astro Ham talked about Ham Radio Deluxe all the way in the section on logging software. You've got Ham Radio Deluxe, which is something you have to pay for. I did have it at one time. I found it difficult to enter old QSOs in the Ham Radio Deluxe because it wanted to use the current date and time and was rather insistent on it. I switched to N3FJP all contact log, where I had a little more success entering old QSOs. Okay, there's also N1MMN, and you can take a look at that if you want to. Now, if you've got something you're used to, you ought to stick with it, because that way you can make it do anything you want. Professor Pat said ionospheric propagation is not reciprocal 100% of the time. I think that's what I kind of said in the video. In fact, it's not reciprocal a lot of the time. There are times when you can hear a station, but they can't hear you, and vice versa. And so if you're calling a DX station and they're really loud, there is a 10-20% chance that they won't hear you at all. However, as you persist, the ionosphere may change again and they'll be able to hear you. Okay? Eric the Wrench 10 times to my, long ago Q-cell YS Coax 50 ohms. He said, this is a C beer. And I looked at this comment, and he's talking about electrical length. And if you're using like a whip or something like that, you have to multiply by a velocity factor of 0.95 to get the physical length that you want. So if you have a physical length that works, to know the electrical length, you actually need to divide by the 0.95, which will make it a little longer. So, yeah, this was one of my most popular videos here. Still is. Tim Book 2, I kept meaning to write and thank you for answering my question. I've made some improvements on my transmit thanks to your advice. From Sugar Victor 0, Sugar Golf Sugar. This is peak power versus average power. His question had to do with why his transmitted power was so much less than the advertised power, and we talked through that there. Clems says they probably need to address impedance matching issues with the D104 mic. They aren't great for modern transmitters. This is true. The output impedance of that mic, I believe it's a low impedance mic. You'll have to check the paperwork on it. The modern radios, like my 7300 here, have 600 ohm input on the mics. And so if you use the D104, you may have to do something to change the impedance so that you get the right input impedance for your transceiver. They do work well with the old radios that had the dynamic mic inputs. There were also radios that had high impedance inputs. So you need to check all that out on the older radios. The new ones are almost uniform at 600 ohms. Where did the 600 ohms come from? That's the old telephone standard that was used for all their wireline work. Okay, start to finish. Podcasting, what do I do if you can't ground the radio? I ask because to get to the grounding wire from my radio outside to the grounding rod would require about 70 feet of grounding wire. I was told a grounding wire should not be that long as it will turn into an antenna. It can, but not necessarily. So how can I ground the radio with such a long ground rod? Okay, you're looking for help when there's a surge, like a nearby lightning strike and so on. Would it at least help if I just grounded all the radio equipment to just a copper pipe inside the house without the copper pipe being grounded to the grounding rod outside? Well, you can experiment a little bit with it. I have recommended, and I've seen this done, even people with second floor radio rooms will go straight down, and all the antennas come to the ground rod, and then they make the run up and inside the house. That way, you've got a single point ground down there. It can really help. I would recommend that you have that ground rod, that you mount all the lightning arresters there, and that every antenna comes in through a lightning surge protector, and that then you run them to your station. You'll have to experiment with how well the ground works for you then. I think it will work better with the connection to the ground rod. Okay. Cannot row, I guess. I'm so glad I found this channel at 35. I really want to get my license and start this hobby, but no one in my vicinity is a ham, so if it weren't for your videos, Dave, I'd be lost. I have a quick question. Is there, let's see, is it possible to inherit a call sign from someone? No, but you do get preference in going for the old call sign if it's family or somebody like that, like your father, uncle, whatever. unless somebody else has already grabbed that call sign. I've always wondered if, like Gmail usernames, are just going to get longer and more complicated as time goes on. That's not going to happen soon with amateur radio call signs. They've got plenty of tricks up their sleeve at the FCC to keep them. Patrick Buick, it's a Victor Echo 9 Echo Sierra. They get reused in Canada. I've heard people apply for a deceased relative's call sign and get it. Yes, that does happen here in the United States too. Okay, good to know. That's pretty wholesome. Something a bit more interesting to leave behind than, I don't know, a number plate. Okay, so note that there are training videos that I've put together that follow the ARRL book, section for section. You can find those by going to, assume you're an ARRL member, or you should be, going to learn.arrl.org and using your ARRL login credentials to get to the videos. There's 3 groups, Tech, General, and Extra. The tech videos are available outside the firewall at the ARRL HQ YouTube channel. Okay? And you can find those and they'll walk you through the sections of the book. Okay? Let's see, this is questions on coax length. I couldn't get 50 feet out as my total yard and garden is 25 feet. Could it be to act as a counterpoise earth? Well, G4GHB, that's in England. You didn't mention anything about what your antenna is. For a garden that's 25 feet, garden in U.S. would call that the yard. You could put a vertical up and lay out radials. Or you could put up an antenna that does not need radials. Or you could, well, there's a lot of things you can do. 25 feet long is really hard for dipole or any other. I just did a video, and it will be appearing soon, on using ham sticks to make a horizontal dipole in remarkably little space. And let's see, Chameleon makes the junction box to make this possible. In fact, you can do 2 different bands at a time. Okay? So, let's see, could it be used to act as a counterpoise? Yeah, I use a 50-foot coax because I'm living on an acre. And all the, not all, but most of the test antennas, I've got a standard 50-foot piece of RG213 that I move between the various antennas to test. And when I did my antennas, let's see, it's their end-fed half-wave for 80 through 10, that acted as a counterpoise from the 49-to-1 balun. I put the thing up as an inverted V. And 49-to-1 balun, which was down on a pole, and ran the coax out to that. And then the coax comes in first through the lightning surge protector at the ground rod, and then comes into the house. So that got me all the counterpoise I needed, and the antenna worked really well. But you may have to experience. Let's see, Sam Grieg, if you can hear them, you can work them. Not always. Not always. I'm just saying not always. Maybe the majority of the time. Maybe 80% of the time, if you can hear them, you can work them. But not all the time, because the paths don't quite go the same way. See, Delta X-ray 444 says, yes, if they both have the propagation above them that feeds each station, no, if no one is receiving the signal and the other not, the skip may be falling short or taking another path. If you can hear them, you can work them is a silly, I'm not going to go that far. It's a presumption made by those who don't understand how signals propagate. We all start out with the assumption that if you can hear them, you can work them. It's not until we get some experience that we recognize that that does not always work all the time. I would not call that presumption silly because many hams make it and it works most of the time. So I would say that we just need to understand that propagation is not always reciprocal, which was the point of the video. Managing SWR with long cable runs, just roll out some LDF750 and call it a day. I'm going to have to look that up. $6-meter. Remember the Heathkit lunch boxes? Actually, those were a little bit before my time. Not by much. 5 to 10 years, maybe. They were AM radios, and they had one for 2 and one for 6 meters. They were AM, okay, and the receivers were very broad, but they worked. I mean, they were very popular. Smart advice, this is something you readily see in Alaska when the KP is 2+ or larger. KP3, your signals are booming into Alaska, but you cannot hear me. My power does not matter. My antenna does not matter. My antenna elevation does not matter. My gain does not matter. As you say, it's not reflection. It's refraction. And don't get me started on the tilted ionosphere up here. Yeah, it tends to follow the magnetic lines of force. Patrick Buick, VE9 Echo Sierra, says blame it on HARP, which was the high altitude atmospheric something program. It was put together by the Air Force to study the ionosphere and to see the effect on ionospheric heating. And they actually put up enough energy to heat the ionosphere. After a while, they stopped the program, turned the whole thing over to the University of Alaska, and escaped with a lot of their test equipment. But it is still running, albeit on a much smaller basis than what was up there before. Now, I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories about it, because is it was secret. The military tends to overclassify, to say that they have something that they're using to study atmospheric heating and then bring scientists in and news people in and talk about it and so on. It would have been a lot better than to saying we're doing some secret research, because then you can make any kind of conspiracy theory out of it you want. Okay, Sylvia Ben David said, let's see, how to acquire an FCC registration number, says thanks. Scott W9AVA, excellent explanation. Okay, Merrill KK4HFG. Sounds like quite the adventure. Oh, this is the Where Have I Been? I kind of went off grid for a couple weeks when I went down to Quartz Fest. And it was not just an adventure, it was high adventure. We got stuck, literally, in Telluride and ended up spending the night in a gas station. Let's see, it's a bit frustrating to deal with atmospheric conditions. Oh, absolutely it is. It is. That's why you want to learn as much as you can about it. Could also be due to basic differences between stations, such as power output antennas, to some degree. Now, when a signal, whether vertically polarized or horizontally polarized, and almost always in ham radio, we deal with linearly polarized signals, meaning we can call it vertical or horizontal. When it hits the ionosphere, the wave actually splits into two waves. One's called the ordinary, and the other's called the extraordinary, sometimes the X wave. Okay, they go in different directions. And they are circularly polarized. They're circularly polarized. The one wave goes in one direction, the extraordinary wave goes in the other direction. And those waves go different directions. Now, when you hear another station, you could be hearing either the ordinary wave or the extraordinary wave. And unless you have an antenna that's actually circularly polarized, where you can switch polarizations, you don't know which one is coming to you unless you actually check. Because if you use a circular antenna, it will work in one direction but not the other. Okay, again, this is for waves bounced off the ionosphere. There's a book by the ARRL that talks about propagation, the physics of propagation. And it's done at a level where it's intuitive rather than throwing a bunch of equations at you. There's also a very nice book from the League about antenna physics, which does the same thing. It'll show you the calculus and then tell you what it really means. Okay, Tim Backus, the ionospheric propagation. We got a lot on that. Good talk. And in that case, an amp will not help. No, if it's just a weakness of the signal, it may help, but not otherwise. Thanks, Dave. Really enjoy all the radio topics you present from AC3HT, who, David, thank you very much. He's also a patron and a great supporter of the channel. I don't understand. Maxwell's equations are linear. Let's take a look at what we mean by linear. Linear simply means they pass through zero point. Okay, and some of them actually have, there's the so-called displacement current that you need to deal with. So I'm going to say, no, they are not linear. They are calculus equations in 3 dimensions. And if you have a current flowing on a wire, by the right-hand rule, the magnetic field's going to be going like that. That's not linear, okay? So that's the flaw in your reason. They are not linear. They're calculus, vector equations, okay? And there's lots of twists and swoops and things like that. I think we have exceeded the 20 minutes, so I'm going to go and see how much of this needs to be cut out. A little bit about people. I've had some people complaining recently that I've been begging for money. All YouTube channels do in some way, shape, or form. They'll tell you that they're supported by the patrons. I know one channel, Blancalerio, that talks a lot about aircraft mishaps and things like that. He's constantly being demonetized by YouTube. So he uses Patreon to support his channel. There are expenses, there are reasons for running a channel, and so on. If you go to dcasler.com/support, it shows you several ways that you can support the channel. If you look under this video on the YouTube page on your home computer, you will see some merchandise. Very few people use that, so it's like, 20 or 30 bucks a month. I do have a Patreon for that. But why do I beg for money? Well, the answer is because I am retired on a relatively fixed income. I have, some savings, but they've been down because the market's been down. So I haven't been drawing from them. Everybody does it, and I appreciate you not liking it, okay? And sometimes when, I watch a lot of videos where they have external sponsors, like NordVPN or somebody's meal package or something like that. And I will freely admit I drag the video across till I'm done with those. I don't like hearing them. So what I'm doing now is putting up a timer on all my begging selections, including this one. And if you look at that in the future as we go through them, you'll find that I try to keep them remarkably short, just a few seconds. Okay, at the beginning of the video, I thank a patron, if possible, a most recent patron. And I run somewhat over 200 patrons that come and go. And I also have a way, if you look at dcasler.com/support, you'll find that there's a way on, let's see, it's PayPal to subscribe to the channel. Also, as you make comments, there is an option there, they're rarely used, to throw in a little bit of money with the comment if you particularly appreciate it. That's rarely done. Also on the live streams, it's possible to put a comment up with something to add to the channel funds there. Note that sending anything to my channel is not tax deductible. And yes, I do pay taxes on it. PayPal and Patreon and Amazon all send me reports at tax time, and they send those same reports to the IRS. So all of that is taxed as ordinary income. So I'm not trying to hide behind a 401(c) because I'm not. I'm not a charity, obviously. I'm just a guy who likes to share information, okay? And also being a charity contributes a great deal of paperwork plus oversight. And I'm just a YouTuber, you know. So from time to time, I want to buy something and use it in the studio. I've got, like this set of headphones here, I've got another one on the way so that my assistant will have headphones too. And the microphone is going bad on this system. There's a lot of crackly crunchy. I've got it temporarily solved, but I'm going to end up having to buy a new antenna for that. They're $100 for the new antenna. So anyway, that's just a little bit of an explanation of that while we're just talking about comments here. So if you would like to support this channel financially, I just told you how to do so. And until we next meet for the next Commentariat this coming Wednesday, 73.